Right? You have some professionals saying you should have structure to your day, get up at this time and continue to have some structure. Then you have other mental health professionals saying, don't be too hard on yourselves. You don't have to be productive. And so people are kind of wondering to themselves, should I be productive or shouldn't I be productive?
Well, I think that America, for one, over-indexed on productivity. And we consider being productive as part of our definition of success. And the question is it? I don't think other nations are that out of balance, quite frankly. I think they have a better balance. And I think what COVID has allowed us to do is reevaluate that definition, that we're kind of living like it's the 1950s right now, the good parts. We have family dinner every night. And if you're alone, you're having dinner on Zoom, hopefully with friends. And I find myself cooking dinner, even though I'm by myself. Like if I was just by myself at home, I'd have a bowl of cereal or an egg, I don't care. But with friends on Zoom, I'm finding myself making dinner. It's really nice.
It's forcing you to slow down.
It's forcing me to slow down. And so I think we need to definitely let ourselves off the productivity hook. It's like I said, I think we over-indexed. And now we're realizing that sending text every moment of every day and being connected every moment of every day, that it's nice not to be connected, and to have gaps. So, and in terms of structure, I think it depends on your personality. Some people want the structure and need the structure, then they should build in structure. Kids definitely need structure, and for people who are okay without structure and a little more loosey-goosey throughout the day, then be you. But I think this whole sort of like, structure people always advise structure, and non-structure people is always say no structure. And it's
right.
Like whatever feels right is the thing you
whatever
should do.
Works.
Yeah.
So you already mentioned one of the silver linings, which is slowing down, taking time to enjoy cooking or people's company, even if it's through a webcam like we're doing now. What are the other silver linings you see from this pandemic?
Well, I think it's really reinforced the value of human relationships. Like I said before, I think we maintain too many of our relationships simply over text, or too much of our communication was simply over text. And now we're calling each other. Like we're having Zoom calls. Like we're actually, tone of voice is way better to make us feel connected than a text. Like I can send someone a text and say, I'm thinking of you. But if I call them up and say, hey, how you doing? It's way more powerful. And I think intellectually, we've all known this, yes, but we're all too busy to do it. And we rationalize that, yeah, that email and text is fine. And I think we've learned that it's not as good. And I hope that lasts. I hope we make more phone calls.
It's very strange for people to keep their distance. And it's taken us some time to get used to the fact of staying 6 feet apart. And I think once we're going to get used to it, it'll be strange for us not to keep that 6 feet apart distance. And yeah, I can see ourselves sanitizing and washing our hands way past this. So what do you think are some other long-term effects after this is all over with, hopefully soon?
Our grandparents who lived through the war or through the Depression, it changed the way they went through life. They would reuse tinfoil and save every jam jar, and were very waste conscious. That's because they lived through the war and the Depression. So who knows what permanent change will happen. I think it's more likely to affect young people who are coming of age, 9, 10, 12, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds. Adults probably a little less so. But I'm very curious. I don't know what the irreparable changes or permanent changes, both positive and negative, or just weird, will take place.
Why do you think, for people that are coming of age, 9, 10, 11-year-old, why do you think it'll affect them more?
Well, there's such formative years, and so much of our life view is formed in these years, in our early teen years as well. I mean, it's why when we make generalizations about entire generations, the boomers, the Xers, the Ys, the Zs, people say, oh, you can't make generalizations about entire generations. Of course you can, because there's, we came of age at a certain time in our life that helped form our worldview. And so they're going through a time in their life where they're forming their worldview, and this absolutely will affect their worldview. I mean, being separated from their friends, being separated from their schools, being paranoid, our parents telling us to wash our hands and wear masks, and it's going to have an effect.
Right.
Even if the parents go back to whatever normal, the new abnormal. It's hard to predict, but I'm definitely curious to find out.
I saw you in Boston. It was maybe a month before we had to wear masks and could even go out in public. And I liked the way you approached happiness, because you said some days you're ahead and some days you're behind.
Yeah.
So if you could explain that a little bit.
Yeah, this comes from the work. It's influenced by the work that I've been doing on the infinite mindset. James Carse, a philosopher in the 1980s, defined these two kinds of games: finite games and infinite games. A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and an agreed upon objective. Football, baseball. There's always a beginning, middle, and end, and if there's a winner, there has to be a loser. And then infinite games have known and unknown players, which means people can join at any time. The rules are changeable, which means you can play however you want. And the objective is to perpetuate the game, to stay in the game as long as possible. We are players in infinite games every day of our lives. There's no such thing as winning education. There's no such thing as winning career. No one's declared the winner of careers. There's no such thing as winning business. But you hear it all the time. People talk about being number one, being the best, and beating their competition in games that have no finish lines. And so that's what I wrote about. If we have to be players in the infinite game, how do we maintain an infinite mindset? Because if we play with a finite mindset in the infinite game, we destroy trust, cooperation, and innovation, amongst other things. And so one of the things that the infinite game influences is how we view our days. So when we label a day as a good day or a bad day, for example, it becomes very much a label. It becomes something fixed. And so I prefer to use ahead and behind. So you have a behind day or an ahead day. And so an ahead day we can't take for granted, which means we have to keep working hard to make things go well. And behind days won't last. And I think it helps reinforce that this is a journey, not an event, that the states that we're in are temporary. In our family and in our team, we no longer have good days and bad days. We have ahead days and behind days. So people say I'm having a behind day today.
Yeah, and I think even with
better tomorrow.
Exactly. Even within a day, I think at noon you could say to yourself, oh, someone honked their horn at me or cut me off in traffic and my boss yelled at me. So by noon, maybe you're already saying this is going to be a bad day. But I like the fact that, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you think it's going to be a bad day, then your attitude toward the rest of the day might not be that great. So I think even within a day, you could be a little ahead and behind, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Have a behind morning, sure. I think it goes back to the question about productivity, which is there's something to be said for space, empty space. And we had this false belief that all empty space had to be filled. If you're walking to the subway, you have to be on text. If you're go to the bathroom, you have to check your email. It's like we had to fill all empty space. And I think what we're realizing is that empty space is actually a nice thing. Empty space is where we get to relax. It's where we get to have ideas. It's where we get to, recharge our batteries. I think this is you can't help but be mindful in these times. We're all forced to be philosophical.
Exactly. So for you, that means even more philosophical than you already are, right? So how do you handle the empty spaces? And people are curious about, how are you, because you're a creative person that's clearly always thinking. So how are you managing this quieter time?
Tiger King.
Are you through the whole series, or?
Of course. Yeah. No, I mean, look, I'm just like everyone else. I have moments of where I just look out a window. I have social time. I'm definitely binging on a couple shows. I've always valued, I used to always, and I will continue building empty space into my calendar because I recognize the importance of allowing one's mind to wander. If you notice, we don't have all of our best ideas in the brainstorming session when we're thinking about it. We have our best ideas in the shower, when we go for a run, or when we go for a walk, when we're not actually engaged, but we allow our minds to wander. That's because the subconscious part of our brain continues to try and solve the problems that we're dealing with or answer the questions that have been asked, but it's not conscious. So these ideas sort of occur to us, but it doesn't give us random ideas. And so I've always been, or for a long time, I've been very good about building in space to allow my mind to wander and pay attention to where my ideas happen so that I can do more of that. People don't fear change. People fear sudden change, and sometimes the devil we know is better than the devil we don't. And we don't fear change if we have someone who believes in us. For me, I believe courage is external. Like, we don't have the courage to jump out of a plane without the parachute on our back. It's the parachute that gave us the courage. It's something external. And so if you have one person in your life, a colleague, a loved one, friend, who, if you face a difficult decision or need discipline, and somebody says, I believe in you, you got this, you got to do this, we'll do it. We don't have to go and sit in a room by ourselves and find the courage. We just have to tell a friend of our ambitions and our dreams and ask them if they'll join us.
Right, and have that support network.
Have that support network. I mean, we forget that. We're social animals, We need each other. We need other people. None of us is strong enough to do this stuff alone, which is one of the reasons I sort of sometimes rail against the self-help industry. We have an entire section of the bookshop called self-help, and we have no section of the bookshop called help others. And yes, we should work on ourselves, but none of us is strong enough to work on ourselves alone. We need help. We need each other. Right. We need people who believe in us. And the books are good. The books are good for guidance.
Right.
But we need each other to actually make the change.
I launched Good News Movement 1.5 years ago, and it's amazing when I have someone who asks for help, the amount of helpers that will offer. I mean, there was one kid in Mexico, this was yesterday, and he put out his stuffed animals, and he was saying, he had a sign that said, I'll exchange my stuffed animals for food for my mom. They were in lockdown and they didn't have enough food, and the whole neighborhood came with food and stuffed animals, but it was because he put that sign. Yeah. Otherwise people wouldn't know. But I think that can be hard for some people, putting out, in this case, that sign. So, I mean, it's amazing how many helpers. That's one thing I've discovered on my journey with the page, is that there's so many helpers out there. And I think we don't tap into it enough. And I don't think social media taps into it enough either. It's such a vehicle to connect helpers with those who need help. So I'm trying to make sure I cover everyone's, or not everyone's, because that would be a very long and boring day for you, Simon, if you had to sit through every single question I have for you.
Long, not boring.
All right. This is interesting because I remember you mentioned that you're an introvert, which didn't necessarily surprise me, because I know introverts can be great at great orators, performers, actors. The question they had was that someone is an introvert and she wants to be a leader. She thinks her mission is to inspire others like yourself, but she's wondering if that's really her why, because she's an introvert. And so I thought that you would be a great person to answer that question.
They're mutually exclusive. They're not the same thing. One is a personality trait. The other one, and your personality trait has nothing to do with your why. Your why is your inner drive. It's the thing that you wake up in the morning inspired to do. It's a deep-seated cause or belief. It's a flame that burns inside you. You can be an introvert or an extrovert, and that doesn't affect your ability to lead either. There are extroverts who are bad leaders, and there are introverts who are incredible leaders. They have nothing to do with each other. So if she wants to be a leader, she should. And her personality offers both advantages and disadvantages. It's balance. Extroverted leaders have advantages and disadvantages. Introverted leaders have advantages and disadvantages. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's who we are. So it's just about being true to herself and navigating and navigating all of it, and being the leader she wished she had, but true to herself all the times. But yeah, I love that she wants to be a leader, and she should find out what kind of leader she's going to be, and her why will help navigate that. But they're completely separate things. If somebody is struggling, the best way to solve our own problems is to help somebody else who's struggling with the same problem. Alcoholics Anonymous has a 12-step program. The first step, most of us are familiar with, it's to admit you have a problem. But the 12th step is the most essential, and it's the commitment to help another alcoholic. Service. So whatever you're struggling with, find someone who's struggling with the same thing and commit to helping them overcome the challenge, and it'll have an amazing impact on you. We are made for service. Human beings are made for service, and when we serve, we are way stronger. So I just want to remind people to take care of each other.